If you run a manufacturing operation in Indiana, there are three developments this week that impact your labor costs, your supply chain, and your training budget all at the same time. Hanjung America just broke ground on a 435,000 square foot energy storage plant in Huntington County, paying more than $28 an hour. That is the offer going out of Northeast Indiana labor markets when hiring opens in late 2026. In Bloomfield, an 1,100-acre defense manufacturing campus adjacent to Crane is now backed by Johns Hopkins, designing the safety framework for 16 tenants producing energetics, with $600 million in projected private investment behind a $75 million federal award. And if you weren't aware, last year in Northern Indiana, the Regional Workforce Board named a 2-year-old startup its Partner of the Year and handed it the keys to WIOA training dollars across 5 counties, which means the path to federal workforce funding in Elkhart, St. Joseph, Marshall, Fulton, and Kosciuszko have all been impacted. In the next few minutes, I'll walk you through what each of these means and the questions worth putting in front of your team this week. If you operate a manufacturing facility within commuting distance of Huntington County, Hanjung America's groundbreaking on April 14th is a labor cost event you need to get ahead of before it becomes a retention problem. Here's what was announced. Hanjung America, the U.S. subsidiary of South Korea-based Hanjung NCS, broke ground on its first U.S. manufacturing facility at River Fork West Industrial Park in Huntington. The plant is 435,000 square feet on 133 acres. It will manufacture cooling systems and fire suppression technologies for large-scale energy storage system containers. The primary customers are Stellantis and Samsung SDI's StarPlus Energy EV battery manufacturing operations in Kokomo, along with Indiana's broader renewable energy ecosystem. Operations begin June 2027. The company will hire 300 at startup and scale to more than 440 at full capacity. Average hourly wage above $28. That's above the Huntington County average. Governor Braun was at the groundbreaking. Huntington Mayor Richard Strick was there. Hanjung America President Kevin Kim called it a direct statement to serve local customers with leading-edge ESS technology. The mayor framed the technology plainly. Hanjung's cooling and fire suppression systems make energy storage safer and more effective. 2 requirements for lowering energy costs across the grid. The state put real money behind this. Indiana Economic Development Corporation committed up to $4.5 million in performance-based tax credits, up to $400,000 in Hoosier Business Investment Tax credits, and up to $200,000 in training grants. Huntington County approved a 10-year property tax phase-in. The River Fork West site has room for additional manufacturing buildings beyond the initial plant. There are 3 things this means for Indiana operations. First, $28 per hour becomes a new reference point in Northeast Indiana manufacturing compensation by the time Hanjung's hiring ramp hits in late 2026. If your best people are inside that commute radius and your current wage bands have not been reviewed in the last 12 months, this is a retention exposure building right now. Second, if you supply into the Kokomo, StarPlus, Energy ESS ecosystem, you now have a Tier 1 adjacent safety components manufacturer inside Indiana. Shorter lead times, local technology support, and a clear signal that ESS supply chain capacity in this state is scaling. Third, a 435,000 square foot fire suppression and cooling plant does not get built without a serious view that large format battery storage installations are expanding fast across the Midwest. That is a demand signal worth tracking. So here's what to watch for. Hanjung's job posting expected late 2026, and how the $28 per hour offering prints against other Northeast Indiana hiring at the time. Watch also for additional ESS supply chain suppliers announcing Indiana sites to co-locate near the Kokomo operation. So here's a question for your team. If $28 per hour becomes the new offer floor in Northeast Indiana by the first quarter of 2027, what does that do to our labor cost line? And are we getting ahead of it now on retention bonuses, wage band reviews, or training-based promotion paths before that posting hits the market? Southern Indiana is building a defense manufacturing cluster, and Johns Hopkins University is writing the safety playbook for it. If you operate within an hour of Bloomfield, or if your facility handles thermal, chemical, or pressurized processes, both of those facts belong in your planning conversations. So here's what was announced. The American Center for Manufacturing and Innovation and Johns Hopkins University Whiting School of Engineering formed a strategic partnership announced April 2nd to develop safety training and career pathways in energetics and advanced manufacturing. The focus is ACMI's National Security Industrial Hub and Munitions Campus in Bloomfield, Greene County, an 1,100-acre development sitting directly adjacent to Naval Surface Warfare Center, Crane, and Crane Army ammunition activity. Ground broke on the campus February 19. The anchor tenant is Prometheus Energetics, a $175 million joint venture between Kratos Defense and Security Solutions and Rafael Advanced Defense Systems, building a 550-acre solid rocket motor and munitions production facility on site. 16 companies have signed agreements to operate at that campus across aerospace engineering, materials science, propellants, energetics, advanced manufacturing, uncrewed systems, AI, and logistics. The campus carries a $75 million Department of Defense Munitions Campus Pilot Program award that is projected to catalyze approximately $600 million in private investment. That is an 8-to-1 multiplier on federal funding. Peter Ziender of Johns Hopkins Whiting School of Engineering described the partnership. Johns Hopkins is helping to build the workforce needed to sustain advanced manufacturing at scale. ACMI's Chief of Staff, Paul Kadzielski, confirmed Johns Hopkins will develop state-of-the-art safety assessments for facility design, operational safety frameworks for complex manufacturing environments, and specialized training for personnel working in energetics production. And that training will benefit all 16 tenants on that campus. 3 implications for your operation. First, if you operate within an hour labor radius of Bloomfield, a 16-tenant defense manufacturing campus with federal money behind it will compete for your shop floor workforce. That hiring pressure is real and it builds as the campus activates. Second, when Johns Hopkins designs a safety framework for a 16-tenant energetics campus, that framework does not stay inside of those 1,100 acres. Insurers and large customers will start pointing to it as the reference standard for an Indiana facility handling reactive chemistries, pressurized systems, or high energy processes, likely within 12 to 24 months. Third, the supply chain underneath 16 defense tenants, industrial gases, machined components, controls, power infrastructure. It's an opportunity for Indiana suppliers who can qualify into defense work. So here's a question for your team. If we're within a 1-hour labor radius of Bloomfield, which of our shop floor roles are most exposed to poaching once that campus begins active hiring? And separately, do any of our processes fall into categories where the Johns Hopkins safety framework will likely become the reference standard? And are we positioned to adopt it before insurers ask? In Northern Indiana, the path to federal WIOA workforce training dollars just changed. And if you operate in any of the 5 counties in Region 2, it's worth understanding what that means for your open roles and your training budget. The Northern Indiana Workforce Board named SlateUp its 2025 Partner of the Year and expanded the company's role to business services representative for the entire WIOA Region 2, covering Elkhart, St. Joseph, Marshall, Fulton, and Kosciuszko counties. SlateUp is a South Bend-based manufacturing talent marketplace founded in 2024 by the 1842 Fund, a Notre Dame-anchored venture fund managed by Alloy Partners. The partnership started inside a single one-work office in Elkhart where SlateUp delivered AI-generated employer-validated career paths to unemployment claimants going through reemployment services. NIWB President Tom Cavanaugh described the logic. They needed something more visible and outcome-oriented, and SlateUp gives workers a clear path for promotion and training while helping manufacturers access funding and talent. Based on those engagement results, NIWB expanded SlateUp's role to the full region's WIOA adult and dislocated worker operations. SlateUp reports that 99% of roles on the platform pay above $18 per hour and 85% pay above $20 per hour, with retention holding above 80% at 3, 6, and 12 months. Those are the company's own reported figures. Sample sizes and methodology are not published. So apply appropriate weight. What is not in question is the structural change. A VC-backed startup now intermediates the Regional Workforce Board's employer-facing operations across 5 northern Indiana counties. The 2 operator takeaways are relatively straightforward. 1, WIOA dollars are federal workforce training funds most manufacturers never access because the application path is kind of opaque, and IWB's move positions SlateUp as a lower friction front door to both Workforce Board services and WIOA eligible training funding in Region 2. If you have open roles in those 5 counties, there's now a more direct path to filling them with co-funded training support. 2, this is a signal about where the Indiana workforce stack is heading. A 2-year-old startup now sits between a regional workforce board and its employer base. Expect similar arrangements in other Indiana workforce regions over the next 18 to 24 months. One note on a statistic circulating from SlateUp's press release. The figure of 83,000 unfilled manufacturing roles in Indiana comes from Connexus Indiana's 2022 report, a point-in-time estimate for that year, not a recurring annual gap. If your team is using that number in planning conversations, frame it as an estimated 83,000 unfilled advanced manufacturing roles as of the last full Connexus benchmark, not as an annual figure. So here's what to watch for. Whether other Indiana workforce regions sign similar arrangements with SlateUp or competing platforms, and whether WIOA disbursements flowing through SlateUp connected employers start appearing in NIWB reporting. So here's a question for your team. If we operate in Elkhart, St. Joseph, Marshall, Fulton, or Kosciuszko County, have we checked whether our current open roles can be posted through SlateUp's NIWB channel? And is any of our planned upskilling spend eligible for WIOA reimbursement, or are we currently leaving money on the table? So there are 3 stories today. They all impact Indiana manufacturing in one way or another. $28 per hour wage event is building in Northeast Indiana and hits your labor line by Q1 of 2027. A 16-tenant defense manufacturing campus in southern Indiana, with Johns Hopkins setting the safety standard, is competing for your workforce and potentially resetting the safety qualification bar for any facility handling energetics-adjacent processes. And in northern Indiana, a new front door to WIOA training dollars is open across 5 counties for manufacturers who take the time to walk through it. The bottom line today is Hanjung America's Huntington groundbreaking is a Northeast Indiana wage floor reset that requires a retention response before late 2026. The Bloomfield Defense Campus is creating both a labor market and a safety standards event for Southern Indiana operators, and WIOA training funding in Region 2 is now more accessible for manufacturers in Elkhart, St. Joseph, Marshall, Fulton, and Kosciuszko counties if they know where to look. Now, obviously, I don't run your plant. You do that. My real job as CEO of Tactical Energy Group is to stay on top of everything that changes the cost and reliability of your power and the economics of making things in Indiana so that we can build the right products and programs for the manufacturing community. But while I'm doing that work anyway, this brief is my way of giving you as much of that insight as I possibly can so you can spend more time running your operation and less time trying to decode your bills and understand rate cases and interpret the headlines. Here are 3 questions for your team, 1 per story, worth putting on the table with your operations, HR, or finance departments this week. If your team can't answer these, you may be making workforce and training decisions without a clear picture of how this week's Indiana manufacturing news directly affects your labor and budget. First, Hanjung is coming online at more than $28 per hour in Huntington. Which of our best people are inside their commute radius, and what does our current offer letter look like against that number? Are we building a retention response now before this posting hits? Second, if we operate within an hour of Bloomfield, which of our shop floor roles are most exposed to defense campus hiring once ACMI's tenants begin active recruitment? And do any of our processes fall into categories where the Johns Hopkins safety framework at the Bloomfield campus will likely become the insurance or customer qualification standard within the next 2 years? Third, we operate in WIOA Region 2, Elkhart, St. Joseph, Marshall, Fulton, or Kosciuszko County? Have we actually tested whether our next 3 open roles and our planned upskilling spend are eligible for WIOA reimbursements through SlateUp's NIWB channel, or are we funding all of that training entirely out of our own P&L when we don't necessarily have to be? If today's brief gave you a clear picture of what's going on with the workforce in northern Indiana, southern Indiana, and northeast Indiana, pass it along to another Indiana plant leader who should be ahead of these conversations before they show up as line items on a budget review or an exit interview. I'm Daniel Burke. This is TEG Daily Indiana Manufacturing News, and I will see you tomorrow morning.